So part 5, we're continuing to look at access points, and we're going to look at their access point antennas, amplifiers, and repeaters, and how they work and when you need to use them. So what you need to know is that every AP you buy has an antenna built in, and it has a specific pattern to it. And you can add external antennas to some APs to improve or change the direction of the coverage. And in this case, we're going to look at the Cisco 2600 access point coverage. So if we look, typically a manufacturer will give you the coverage diagram in the azimuth plane and the elevation plane for every AP they manufacture at 2.4 gigahertz and at 5 gigahertz. So you can see it's not a perfect circle. That's because there's various electronic components inside the access point that affect the signal. It's even worse in the elevation plane. But what I want you to take notice of is the orientation of the access point in reference to the diagram. So we're looking at what is our signal strength here, basically, and depending on where we are compared to this access point. And this is going to be pretty important in a minute. So if it's not strong enough, then you need an antenna, and that means first you need to buy an access point that allows you to plug in an antenna. We have a video that shows you how to do that. So there are some things you need to consider when selecting an antenna. First of all, the frequency of the antenna. Is it going to be 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz? You might have to buy multiple antennas to accommodate the multiple frequencies. The second thing is the gain on the antenna. By how many decibels is your signal strength going to improve? The third thing is the direction. And the direction is important because different antennas have different shapes, and therefore they can point the signal at different areas of the room or the building, depending on the solution that you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, diversity says that you can have different antenna patterns, and that can give you the ability to optimize your signal. And so, if we start by looking at directional antennas, that means basically a directional antenna is pointing a signal at a specific area. And so if you've got Wi-Fi access points on the edges of your building, you don't want the signal to escape the building. You just want to point it inwards. So a directional antenna can provide security in that way. I would not take that kind of security very seriously. So not a very effective measure, but some of the pundits keep telling us that directional antennas are a good security feature. So if we look at different antenna types and compare with the diagrams that I showed you earlier, we've got our standard dipole antenna, and basically you can see that the dipole sends its signal basically all the way around. So if you take this circle of the dipole, the signal is broadcasting everywhere. And these dipole antennas are pretty flexible, so you can bend them to change the direction of the signal. Some APs support up to 6 dipole antennas, so you can have 6 different directions for your signal. 6 different axes basically. If you look here, this is a antenna that's pointing up and down, so this is the signal that you're getting. You're not getting too much signal above or below the antenna. And now we've got our sector antenna. This is a pretty good antenna for one direction. So any ways, if you're pointing this away from the Cisco, then you're getting the signal all the way around this antenna, around this beveled part for the most part, and you're not seeing too much at the top or the bottom. So, and then we look at our Omni antenna, which again, it acts pretty much like the dipole antenna, with the exception that you do see a signal on the top and the bottom in various different positions. And here's another directional antenna. This tends to only point in one direction. So if this antenna here, if it was flat, they always tell you to point this antenna in a specific direction. So you're only getting a signal, like let's say in this area. Anything pointed this way is getting a signal. Below the antenna, you get pretty much nothing. And you know, if the antenna is sitting flat, so the Cisco logo is facing up, you're getting a huge signal, you know, from this area, and nothing from the other side. And they accomplished that probably with some very good shielding material on the back of this antenna. And then we've got our Yagi antenna. So if you think about this again, this antenna, if this part was sticking out of the page here, you've got a very good signal at the top and diverse signal all around, but mainly at the top. And if this was pointing straight up, you get the same thing. So the signal is basically coming out of this area, and pretty much nothing in here at all. And then we got our mast antenna again. So if this mast was sticking out of the page, the circle was this circle, we're getting a very big signal up here, and very pretty much no signal coming out of the sides. This antenna, it's a very good for getting a signal straight up out of the antenna, which is good if you need a Wi-Fi signal above the antenna. So, I mean, we've just covered Cisco antennas here. Not saying that Cisco is the best, but they do make good antennas. Of course, there are many other antenna vendors and many other access point vendors, and every vendor has their own unique antennas and their own data sheets. So you need to find the data sheet for your antenna to figure out exactly what pattern you're going to see. And the typical gain for an antenna is between 5 and 15 decibels. So it's a good gain. How far that signal travels depends on the area that you have. Is it outdoors? Is it indoors? Is there metal shelving that can detract from the coverage area? So if antenna is not good enough, you can also add an amplifier, and the amplifier sits between the AP and the antenna, and it has to be powered. And of course, if you don't have electricity, you can use PoE on some antennas, amplifiers. So you would have to run an additional data cable to the PoE amplifier, and you need to be careful though. Amplifiers might be illegal. So if you have an area and you can't run a data cable for whatever reason, then you can add a repeater, and a repeater does just that. It repeats the signals that it hears from devices and from APs, and it improves the coverage area, and it does not decrease network congestion because it's not an AP. So you can't power a repeater with PoE. I mean, technically you could, but if you could reach a repeater with a data cable, then you might as well just install an AP in that spot instead of a repeater. And repeaters have antennas, so you can add antennas to the repeaters. You could probably even add amplifiers to them as well.